The Bentley had been sitting in the underground garage for 47 minutes, engine off, headlights dead, one woman inside, and nobody brave enough to knock twice. Rain slid down the exit ramp in silver threads, pooling near the yellow speed bump, where the city noise faded into a low, distant hum. Every other car from the Whitmore Meridian Gala had already left. The board members had gone home in black SUVs. The photographers had packed their cameras. The champagne glasses upstairs had been cleared from the ballroom before midnight. But Claire Whitmore had not moved. She sat behind the wheel in a pale silk blouse and a dark blazer, both too perfect for the way her hands trembled on the leather steering wheel. Her phone kept buzzing in the cup holder, lighting up with names she refused to read. Richard, Daniel, board office, private security. Each vibration flashed across her face for half a second, then disappeared, leaving her in the blue glow of the dashboard clock. 12:38 in the morning. Outside the car, Elijah Brooks stood under a flickering fluorescent light with a mop bucket beside him and a paper cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. He was not security, not family, not anyone with permission to care. Just the night shift parking attendant who had noticed the richest woman in the building sitting alone like the world had locked her inside her own car. Elijah checked the ramp, then the elevator, then the camera in the corner. He knew how this looked. A black man in an old brown work jacket standing near a white woman's Bentley after midnight in a private garage. He knew how fast concern could turn into accusation. Men like him learned that before they learned how to tie a tie. Still, he did not walk away. His daughter Naomi was asleep 2 miles away in their small apartment, probably curled around the stuffed rabbit with the missing ear. Mrs. Alvarez from next door would be listening for the phone in case Naomi woke up scared. Elijah should have been home already. He should have been rinsing coffee from his thermos, checking Naomi's homework folder, setting his alarm for 6:15. Instead, he stood in the cold garage, watching a woman who had everything sit as if she had nowhere safe to go. He stepped closer, slow enough for the camera to see both hands. He stopped 6 feet from the driver's side window. Claire did not look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the concrete wall ahead, where a red exit sign blinked like a tired heartbeat. Elijah raised one hand and tapped the glass once with his knuckle. Soft, barely more than rain. Nothing. He waited. Then he leaned just close enough for his voice to carry through the sealed window. "Ma'am, I am not here to bother you. I just need to know you are breathing." The words hung there, small and careful. Claire's fingers tightened around the wheel. That was the only answer. Elijah saw it. A movement no one else would have noticed. Not enough to call help. Not enough to walk away. He backed up 2 steps and lowered his hand. "All right," he said, mostly to himself. "That is enough for now." He did not knock again. He did not call her name. He did not pretend her silence belonged to him. He walked to the concrete pillar across from her car, dragged over a plastic chair left by the cleaning crew, and sat down where she could see him through the windshield if she wanted to. Not too close. Not too far. Just there. The garage settled around them. Pipes clicked overhead. Rain whispered down the ramp. Claire's phone buzzed again, then stopped. For the first time all night, she turned her head a fraction of an inch toward the man sitting outside her car. Elijah did not stare back. He looked at the floor, holding his cold coffee between both hands like patience was something warm he could keep from spilling. Upstairs, the building still carried her name in polished brass. Down here, beneath all that glass and money, Claire Whitmore sat alone in the dark while a man with no reason to stay quietly refused to leave. The first person who noticed Elijah was not supposed to notice him at all. A young security guard named Mason Reed stepped out of the service elevator with a radio clipped to his shoulder and a half-eaten protein bar in his hand. He slowed when he saw the plastic chair, the mop bucket, and Elijah sitting across from the Bentley like a man waiting outside a hospital room. Mason looked at the car, then at Elijah, then back at the car. The expression on his face changed before he said a word. Elijah had seen that expression before. In stores, in lobbies, on sidewalks after dark. It was the look people wore when they had already built a story and were only searching for details to support it. Mason slipped the protein bar into his pocket. "What are you doing down here?" he asked. His voice echoed against the low ceiling. Elijah set his coffee on the ground and stood slowly. Not because Mason outranked him, because sudden movements had never helped a man like him. "Finishing my shift," Elijah said. Mason looked toward the Bentley. "Your shift is by the booth." It was Then why are you sitting here? Elijah glanced at the car, careful not to point. She has not moved in close to an hour. Mason gave a short laugh with no humor in it. You watching her now? Elijah let the words pass through the air before answering. A pipe clicked overhead. Somewhere near the ramp, a tire rolled through a puddle and disappeared into the street. No, he said. I am making sure she is safe. Mason's hand moved to the radio. That is not your job. Elijah nodded once. Maybe not. Inside the Bentley, Claire heard them. The voices came through the glass as muffled shapes at first, low and blurred, but she understood enough. Her eyes shifted to the side mirror. She could see Elijah standing with his hands visible, shoulders square, face calm in the harsh garage light. She could see Mason standing too close, chin lifted, trying to look older than he was. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel this time. Her fiancé. The man who had stood beside Richard less than 2 hours ago and called betrayal strategy. Claire turned the phone over. The screen went dark. Outside, Mason pressed the button on his radio. I have a situation on level B2, near the executive parking row. Elijah did not interrupt. He did not raise his voice. He only looked once at the Bentley, then back at Mason. Call whoever you need to call, he said. Just do not scare her. Mason blinked, thrown by the sentence. It was too soft to be defiance and too firm to be apology. Inside the car, Claire's breath caught. Not because he had defended himself. He had not. Not because he had asked permission. He had not done that either. He had thought of her fear before his pride. That small mercy reached her in a place no board vote, no apology, no polished speech had touched all night. The radio crackled. A woman from the front desk answered, asking Mason to repeat the location. Mason turned away to speak into his shoulder. Elijah bent down, picked up his coffee, then moved the plastic chair back against the pillar where he found it. For one quiet second, Claire thought he was leaving. Something inside her tightened with a strange and immediate panic. She had not asked him to stay. She had not even thanked him for being there. But the idea of the garage returning to its original emptiness felt colder than the leather under her palms. Mason ended the call and pointed toward the booth. Go back to your post. I will handle this. Elijah looked at the closed car door. Then he nodded. All right. He took one step away. Then another. Claire watched his reflection shrink in the side mirror. Her thumb moved before she fully understood it. A small click broke the silence. The Bentley unlocked. Mason froze. Elijah stopped walking, but he did not turn around too fast. The driver's door opened a few inches. Not wide enough for anyone to see her clearly. Just enough for her voice to escape. It came out low, rough, and tired. Tell them to leave. Mason stared at the narrow opening like the car itself had spoken. Elijah stood still in the middle of the lane, rainwater shining behind him at the ramp. He did not smile. He did not look relieved. He only turned back with the same careful calm and said, She asked for space. The words did not sound like much, but they changed the shape of the garage. Mason looked from Elijah to the cracked open door, his radio still hissing softly against his shoulder. For the first time since he stepped off the elevator, he had no script for what he was seeing. Claire Whitmore was not asking for him. She was not asking for the head of security. She was not asking for Daniel, or Richard, or anyone with a key card that opened the private floors. She had opened the door 3 inches for the man Mason had been ready to remove. Elijah kept his eyes on the concrete between them. That mattered. Claire noticed. Most people looked at her too much when she was weak. They studied her face for damage. They searched for leverage. Elijah gave her the dignity of not being examined. Mason cleared his throat. Miss Whitmore, are you all right? The silence inside the car stretched. The question was ordinary. The answer was impossible. Claire's fingers rested on the inside handle. One fingernail was chipped. She stared at it as if it belonged to someone else. I said I need space, she answered. Mason swallowed. Yes, ma'am. He took one step back, then another, but his eyes stayed on Elijah. I will be at the elevator. Elijah nodded. Thank you. That simple courtesy made Mason look even younger. He hesitated, then walked away, his shoes squeaking faintly across the damp floor. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime and closed around him. The garage became quiet again, but not empty. Claire sat behind the narrow opening, breathing through the small space between the door and the frame. Elijah remained where he was, near the center lane, far enough away to make leaving possible. She could see his boots now, worn leather. What at the edges? One lace tied tighter than the other. She noticed the small things because the big things were too heavy. You can go, she said. Her voice was steadier now, but only because she forced it to be. Elijah did not move right away. I can. She looked up through the gap. Then why are you still here? He glanced toward the ramp, where rain whispered against the pavement beyond the garage mouth. Because you did not ask me to. Claire almost laughed. It came out as a breath instead. People usually do not wait to be dismissed. People usually want to be useful. And you do not. Elijah looked at the plastic chair by the pillar, then at the dark phone in her cup holder. I have learned there is a difference between helping and crowding. The sentence settled between them. Claire looked away first. She was used to men who entered rooms like. They owned the air. Men who solved problems by making themselves larger. Men who heard silence and treated it like an invitation to speak. Elijah did none of that. He stood in a stained work jacket under bad lighting, hands loose at his sides, and somehow made the space feel less dangerous by taking up less of it. What is your name? She asked. Elijah Brooks. She repeated it quietly, not for him, but as if placing it somewhere safe in her mind. You work here. Nights. Parking and maintenance when they are short. That is 2 jobs. Feels like 3 when the elevator breaks. A small sound escaped her before she could stop it. Not quite a laugh. Not quite relief. Elijah gave half a smile, then let it go. He did not chase the moment. Claire's eyes moved to his paper cup on the ground. Your coffee is cold. It has been cold since midnight. Why keep holding it? He looked down at the cup like he had forgotten it was there. Habit. Bad habit. Most of mine are cheaper than therapy. This time, her mouth moved for real. The smile lasted less than a second, but it changed her face. Then her phone buzzed again, sharp against the silence. The screen lit up with Daniel's name. Claire's smile disappeared so quickly it seemed stolen. Her hand moved toward the phone, stopped, and curled into a fist on her lap. Elijah saw the name reflected faintly in the window. He looked away before she could feel seen in the wrong way. You are not going to ask, she said. No, ma'am. Everyone else has. Looks like that did not help. Claire shut her eyes. The dashboard light turned her skin pale blue. For several seconds, all Elijah heard was the rain, the pipes, and the uneven rhythm of her breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. Do you know who I am? Yes, ma'am. Then you know people do not say no to me. Elijah nodded once. Maybe that is part of the problem. Her eyes opened. Not angry. Not yet. Just awake. No one had spoken to her that plainly in years without wanting something afterward. She studied the slice of his face visible beyond the door. Tired eyes. Calm mouth. A man carrying a whole life behind his quiet. You are very comfortable risking. Your job, she said. No, Elijah answered. I am very uncomfortable watching someone disappear in front of me. The garage went still again. Claire's fingers loosened on the handle. The door opened another inch. The extra inch of open door let the cold air reach her. Claire felt it move across her knees, sharp and real, carrying the smell of rain, concrete, motor oil, and the faint bitterness of Elijah's old coffee. It was the first honest thing she had felt in hours. Upstairs, everything had been polished until it became false. The crystal lights. The applause. Daniel's hand resting at the small of her back, while he quietly helped Richard corner her into a decision that would gut her father's company and call it growth. Down here, nothing pretended. A pipe leaked near the far wall. The yellow paint on the parking lines had started to peel. Elijah's jacket was worn thin at the cuffs. Claire looked at those cuffs because looking at his face felt too close to admitting she needed someone there. I should go upstairs, she said. Elijah did not answer right away. He looked toward the elevator, then back to the ramp. Is that where you want to go? She gave a dry, tired smile. One has never been a reliable business strategy. Maybe not. He shifted his weight, slow and careful. But it is a decent place to start when the alternative is sitting in a car until morning. That should have offended her. From anyone else, it would have. From Elijah, it landed differently. Not as judgment. As a handrail. Claire inhaled, but the breath caught halfway. Her phone lit up again. Richard Vale. The name glowed white against black glass, patient and poisonous. She reached for it, then stopped before touching the screen. Elijah saw the hesitation and turned his head toward the far wall, giving her privacy even inside a moment he already understood. That was when the service elevator opened again. This time, the man stepping out was not Mason. He was older, broad-shouldered, and wrapped in a camel coat that looked too expensive for the garage. Richard Vale walked with the calm of someone who expected doors to open before he reached them. Mason followed 2 steps behind him, face tight with regret. Claire went still. Elijah noticed before she made a sound. Her hand gripped the edge of the door. Her breathing changed. Small things. But Elijah had spent years reading small things. A child going quiet before tears. A landlord smiling before bad news. A customer using politeness like a locked gate. Richard stopped 10 feet from the Bentley and smiled at Claire through the open gap. There you are. His voice was smooth enough to leave no fingerprints. Everyone has been worried. Claire did not answer. Richard's eyes slid to Elijah. The smile thinned. And who is this? Elijah stepped back, not because he was afraid of Richard, but because Claire had opened the door only as far as she could bear. He would not let another man crowd that space through him. Elijah Brooks, he said. Night staff. Richard looked at the mop bucket, then at the coffee cup, then at Elijah's face. Night staff do not usually hold private conferences with the chief executive officer in dark garages. Mason stared at the floor. Claire's jaw tightened. Still, no words came. Elijah understood then that Richard did not need truth. He needed hesitation. A few seconds of her silence would become a story by morning. He could feel the trap forming around him, quiet and clean. The kind built by men who never had to raise their voices. I was making sure she was safe, Elijah said. Richard gave a soft laugh. How noble. He turned slightly toward Mason. Did you document this? Claire's eyes flicked up. Elijah caught it. Not fear exactly. More like exhaustion meeting one more locked door. Richard took 1 step closer to the car. Elijah did not block him. He simply moved to the side, keeping his hands visible, keeping his voice low. Sir, she asked for space. Richard's face hardened by half an inch. And you appointed yourself guardian of that space? No, sir. Elijah looked at Claire's door, then back at him. I heard her ask for it. The words were plain. That made them harder to dismiss. Richard leaned toward the opening. Claire, if this man has made you uncomfortable, all you have to do is say so. There it was. A sentence dressed as concern, shaped like a weapon. Elijah felt every part of it. If Claire stayed silent, Mason would call it uncertainty. Richard would call it evidence. By sunrise, Elijah would be the man who frightened a powerful woman in a garage. He thought of Naomi's backpack by their front door, the purple one with the broken zipper. He thought of rent due Friday. He thought of how quickly a job could disappear when the wrong person decided a man looked guilty. His throat tightened once. Then he let it go. I will leave if she asks me to, Elijah said. His voice did not shake. Richard looked amused. Men like you always know how to sound innocent. The garage seemed to lose its air. Mason looked up fast. Claire's face changed. Elijah did not move. Only his eyes did, narrowing for a heartbeat before softening again into something heavier than anger. And men like me learn early, he said quietly, that anger does not keep us safe. The sentence hit the concrete and stayed there. Claire opened the door wider. Her heel touched the ground first. Then her hand pressed to the frame as she stepped out. She was not steady. Elijah's arm started forward by instinct, then stopped before crossing the space between them. He waited for permission even then. Claire saw it. Richard saw it too. She straightened as much as she could, one hand still on the car, her eyes fixed on Richard. He did not touch me, she said, her voice rough but clear. He waited. Mason lowered his radio. Richard's smile vanished, not all at once, but slowly, like a light being turned down. Claire looked at Elijah then. Really looked. Not at the jacket. Not at the job. Not at the color of his skin against the fluorescent glare. At the restraint. The cost of it. The quiet discipline it took to stand there while being measured by someone else's suspicion and still choose not to become what they expected. Elijah gave the smallest nod. Not victory, not pride, just acknowledgement. Claire's fingers loosened from the car door. For one fragile second, the garage no longer felt like a place she had been trapped. It felt like a place someone had protected without ever claiming the right to own it. Richard left without another word, but he did not leave. Quietly, his shoes struck the concrete with sharp, measured taps, each one carrying a promise he was too polished to say out loud. Mason followed him to the elevator, pausing only once to glance back at Elijah. There was embarrassment in the young guard's face now. Maybe shame. Maybe the first uncomfortable shape of understanding. Elijah did not hold his eyes long enough to punish him with it. Some men needed correction. Some needed time. The elevator doors closed, and the garage exhaled. Claire remained beside the Bentley with one hand on the open door, as if the car were the only thing keeping her upright. The cold had found her now. It touched her throat, her wrists, the thin places where expensive clothing did nothing against real weather. Elijah saw her shoulders tremble once. He looked away before she could hide it. "You want me to call someone?" he asked. Claire gave a hollow breath. "That is what started this." He nodded as though that made complete sense, and somehow it did. Her phone buzzed again inside the car. This time, neither of them looked at it. The sound came and went, small and desperate, like a trapped insect against glass. Elijah walked to the concrete pillar, picked up his paper cup, then remembered it was empty and cold. He set it back down. "There is a vending machine by the booth," he said. "Water. Bad coffee. Crackers that have been there since last football season." Claire stared at him. For a second, her mouth almost softened. "That sounds terrible." "It is consistent." A quiet laugh escaped her before she could stop it. It was not pretty. It was tired and cracked around the edges. But it was real. Elijah let it pass without making it important. That was the strange thing about him, Claire noticed. He did not grab at the small signs of her humanity. He did not act rewarded when she smiled. He just allowed the moment to exist, then gave it room to breathe. He walked to the booth and returned with a sealed bottle of water and a pack of peanut butter crackers. He placed both on the hood of the Bentley, closer to her than to him, then stepped back. "No charge," he said. Claire looked at the items on the hood. The bottle was ordinary. The crackers were slightly bent inside the wrapper. They looked more sincere than every flower arrangement in the gala ballroom. "You keep feeding women in parking garages?" she asked. "Only the ones who look like they might forget they are human." The words were gentle, but they found something raw. Claire turned toward the ramp so he would not see her face clearly. Rain glittered beyond the garage entrance, falling through the orange streetlight. For the first time all night, she opened the water. Her hand shook so much the plastic crackled. Elijah noticed. He said nothing. Silence became the kindness again. She took one small sip, then another, like her body had been waiting for permission to need something simple. "Daniel was supposed to stand with me tonight," she said at last. The name came out flat, not broken, emptier than broken. Elijah kept his gaze on the far wall. "The man calling your phone?" Claire nodded once. "My fiancé." The word seemed to embarrass her. Richard offered him a seat on the transition committee. A title. Shares. A future polished enough for both of them. All he had to do was tell me I was being emotional. Elijah's jaw moved slightly, but he did not speak. Claire looked down at the crackers. "I run a company with 12,000 employees. I can negotiate with banks, unions, governors, men who smile while hiding knives in their contracts. But I could not make the person sitting next to me tell the truth." Her voice thinned at the end. Elijah waited until the silence stopped shaking. "My daughter used to hide in the hallway closet," he said. Claire looked over. He still was not looking at her. First year after her mother left. She would sit behind the winter coats with a flashlight and a box of cereal. Would not cry where I could see her. "What did you do?" Sat outside the door. He rubbed his thumb along the seam of his cup. "Not close enough to trap her. Not far enough for her to think I left." Claire's eyes stayed on him. "Did it work?" Elijah gave a small, tired smile. "Not at first. Some nights she fell asleep in there. Some nights I fell asleep in the hallway. Then one night she opened the door and asked if I was still there." He finally looked at Claire, but only briefly. That was the whole question. The garage blurred a little in her vision. She blinked until it came back. There were people who broke doors down and called it love. People who waited outside and understood the door mattered. Maybe everyone who had ever been hurt knew the difference. Claire picked up the crackers, opened the wrapper carefully, and took one. It tasted dry and plain and almost impossible to swallow. Still, she ate it. Elijah turned his head toward the ramp, giving her the privacy of not being watched while she accepted help. Somewhere above them, the building hummed with money and locked offices and decisions waiting to ruin morning. Down here, Claire Whitmore stood beside her car, holding convenience store crackers in one hand and a bottle of water in the other, while the first honest thing she had received all night came from a man everyone else had nearly asked to leave. Elijah's phone vibrated in his jacket pocket just as Claire swallowed the last dry piece of cracker. The sound was soft, almost hidden under the rain, but his face changed before he touched it. Not panic. Something gentler. Something tired and immediate. He pulled the phone out, looked at the screen, and his shoulders eased in a way Claire had not seen all night. I need to take this, he said. Of course. He stepped away toward the yellow line near the ramp, far enough to give her space, close enough that his voice still carried in pieces through the concrete quiet. Hey, baby. 2 words, and the man changed. The same low voice, but warmed from the inside. Claire turned slightly, not meaning to listen, then found herself unable not to. She heard a small voice through the speaker, thin with sleep. Elijah lowered his head. No, I am not mad. Why would I be mad? A pause. Rain tapped the ramp behind him. Because scared is not a crime, Naomi. Claire looked down at the water bottle in her hand. Naomi. The name fit the sticker she had seen earlier on his old thermos, a crooked gold star pressed near the lid. Elijah leaned one shoulder against the pillar, eyes soft on the floor. The presentation is tomorrow, not tonight. Tonight your job is to breathe and let your body rest. Another pause. The child must have said something that hurt him because Elijah closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, his voice stayed steady. Listen to me. You do not have to be brave all at once. Just be brave until the next breath. Claire stopped moving. The words slipped past every defense she had left. She had been taught to be brave like a building. Tall, sealed, lit from the outside. No cracks visible from the street. She had never been told bravery could be measured in breaths. Elijah continued, quieter now. Put your hand on your chest. I will count with you. He counted slowly. 1, 2, 3. His voice filled the garage without taking it over. Claire found herself breathing with him before she realized it. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The cold in her ribs loosened by a fraction. She hated that it helped. She needed that it helped. Is Mrs. Alvarez there? Elijah asked. A pause. Good. You thank her for me. And drink some water. Not juice. Water. Another pause. A small smile touched his mouth. Yes, I know water is boring. Boring keeps people alive. Claire looked away so his tenderness would not catch her staring. A minute later, Elijah ended the call with a promise to be home soon. He stood there after the screen went dark, holding the phone like it weighed more than it should. Then he slipped it back into his pocket and returned, not too close. Claire watched him with a new kind of attention. Not curiosity. Recognition. She is 8. Elijah nodded. Going on 43 when she wants to win an argument. Presentation. Solar system project. She knows every moon of Jupiter, but standing in front of 22nd graders feels like Congress. Claire's mouth softened. That sounds reasonable. It is. 2nd graders are ruthless. The small joke settled between them, warm and modest. Then Claire looked at the ramp again. Her mother? Elijah's hands went still around the empty cup. For a moment, she wished she had not asked. Gone, he said. No bitterness. No performance. Just a door closed carefully. She left when Naomi was 4. Some people run out of road before they run out of love. Claire turned back to him. That answer was not what she expected. Most people used absence like evidence. Elijah held it like something he refused to hand to a child as a weapon. You do not sound angry, she said. I was. He looked toward the elevator, where the numbers glowed red above the doors. But children do not know what to do with grown-up anger. They pick it up and think it belongs to them. Claire felt that sentence settle in a place her father had left crowded. The late-night lessons. The expectations dressed as legacy. The way grief had become a company policy no one dared question. So you just forgave her? Elijah shook his head. Forgiveness is not always one big holy thing. Sometimes it is just deciding your kid does not have to pay interest on somebody else's debt. The garage seemed quieter after that. Claire looked at him, at the worn jacket, the tired eyes, the man who had been accused, dismissed, and still took a phone call from a frightened child as if the whole world could wait its turn. She had spent years around powerful men who called themselves protectors. Most only protected what made them look strong. Elijah protected the small places no one photographed. A closet door. A child's breathing. A woman's silence in a garage. The cold moved through Claire again, and this time she let herself shiver. Elijah noticed. He took off his jacket, folded it once, and placed it on the hood of the Bentley beside the empty cracker wrapper. Then he stepped back. He did not offer it like a rescue. He left it there like a choice. Claire stared at the jacket. Dark brown, frayed at one cuff. warm from his shoulders. Slowly, she reached for it and pulled it around herself. It smelled faintly of rain, coffee, and laundry soap. For the first time that night, she did not feel like the chief executive officer of anything. She felt like a person standing in a cold garage, wearing a stranger's jacket, learning that safety did not always announce itself with authority. Sometimes it waited quietly, 6 feet away, and let you decide when to reach for warmth. Claire stood in Elijah's jacket for almost a full minute before either of them spoke. The sleeves hung past her wrists. The zipper was cracked near the bottom. One cuff had been mended by hand with black thread that did not quite match the fabric. It should have looked wrong against her silk blouse and tailored slacks, against the Bentley and the executive parking sign with her name printed in brushed steel. Instead, it made the whole garage feel less staged, more honest. Elijah kept his eyes on the rain beyond the ramp, giving her time to decide whether being helped would feel like weakness. Claire pulled the jacket tighter around herself. "You should go home," she said. "Your daughter is waiting. She is asleep now. You said you would be home soon." "I will." He looked at the elevator doors, then back toward the ramp. "Soon has been stretched a little tonight." Claire looked down at her phone inside the car. The screen had gone dark, but she knew the messages were still there. Daniel, Richard, legal, board office, names dressed up as obligations. She had spent her whole adult life answering every call because silence felt like losing control. Tonight, for the first time, she let the phone stay unanswered. "I do not know how to go back up there," she admitted. The sentence surprised them both. It was too plain, too naked. She almost corrected it, almost reshaped it into something cleaner, something a chief executive officer could say without sounding like a woman standing at the edge of herself. Elijah did not rescue her from the honesty. He let it remain. "Then do not start with up there," he said. "Start with right here." Claire turned toward him. "That sounds like something from a refrigerator magnet." "Maybe." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Still true." She breathed out, almost amused, almost angry, almost grateful. The emotions crossed her face so quickly they seemed to trip over one another. "You are very calm for someone who nearly lost his job because of me." Elijah glanced at her then. "I nearly lost my job because a man saw what he wanted to see." Claire absorbed that. The truth of it did not accuse her, but it did not excuse the world around her either. "I should have spoken sooner," she said. "You spoke when you could. That is generous." No, his voice stayed low. "That is accurate." The words settled into the space between them. Claire had spent years around people who used kindness as a polished tool. They softened bad news to make themselves look noble. They forgave quickly so they could feel above the harm. Elijah's accuracy felt different. It did not flatter her. It did not crush her. It simply made room for what was true. She leaned back against the side of the Bentley, still holding the water bottle. The metal was cold through the jacket. "My father built this company after my mother died," she said. "He used to say grief was only useful if you turned it into work." Elijah did not move. "I was 16 when he said it the first time. I thought it made him strong." Her eyes stayed on the wet ramp. "Then I spent the next 18 years proving I could be useful too." A car passed on the street above, its tires hissing through rain. For a moment, the sound filled everything. Elijah looked at the floor near his boots. "That is a hard thing to inherit." Claire laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "You make it sound like a house. Sometimes people leave us houses. Sometimes they leave us weather." She looked at him then. Really looked. "Who taught you to talk like that?" "Bills." He shrugged. "A child. Long nights. Not enough sleep. You learn to say things plain when you do not have energy left to decorate them." Claire held that answer the way she had held the coffee earlier, both hands around something warmer than expected. She could see Naomi more clearly now in her mind. A little girl in a hallway closet. A father sitting outside, probably with his back against the wall, pretending patience did not hurt. She wondered how many people had walked past Elijah in this building without ever imagining the size of the life he carried home after midnight. When Naomi opened the closet door, Claire asked, "What did you say?" Elijah's face changed slightly. Not sadness. Memory. Nothing at first. Nothing. She had done the hard part. "I figured the least I could do was not rush it." Claire looked away. The words found her too precisely. All night, everyone had rushed her. Pick up. Come upstairs. Sign this. Deny that. Smile. Decide. Lead. Elijah had done the one thing no one else had considered. He had let the locked door remain a door until she could touch the handle herself. And then, she asked. Then she asked if I was mad. Claire's fingers tightened around the bottle. Elijah's voice stayed even. I told her no. Then I asked if she wanted cereal or a sandwich. That was it. That was it. No speech. She was 5. Speeches are just weather to a 5-year-old. Claire almost smiled. Then her eyes lowered. Adults are not much better. No, Elijah said. They just pretend to listen longer. The quiet that followed was different from the silence inside the car. Less sealed. Less punishing. Claire took another sip of water and felt the simple motion anchor her back into her body. She noticed the cracked paint on the pillar, the humming light overhead, Elijah's empty cup sitting by his boot, the small, ordinary evidence of a world that had not ended, even though hers had tilted. I offered Daniel a life most people would kill for, she said. He still traded me for a better one. Elijah did not answer quickly. That was becoming the thing she trusted most about him. He did not treat pain like a question he had to solve before the timer ran out. Some people do not betray you because you were not enough, he said. They betray you because enough was never what they were looking for. Claire closed her eyes. The sentence hurt cleanly. No drama. No pity. Just a blade of truth wrapped in a quiet voice. A tear slipped before she could stop it. She turned her head toward the ramp, but not fast enough. Elijah saw. He did not step closer. He did not apologize for seeing. He only looked down, giving her the dignity of a shadow. That was when the moral question of the night changed. It was no longer whether a powerful woman could trust a stranger. It was whether any person, rich or poor, strong or tired, could recognize real care when it arrived without a receipt, without a witness, without a demand. Claire wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand. Why did you stay? She asked. Really? Elijah thought about Naomi. He thought about the first night she had slept in the hallway because the bedroom felt too big without her mother's voice in it. He thought about all the people who had walked by his own hard days because his face looked like it could handle more. Because I know what it feels like when people assume your silence means you are fine, he said. Claire looked back at him. The garage lights buzzed softly above them. Rain kept falling beyond the ramp. Her phone remained dark in the car. For the first time that night, she did not feel rescued. She felt accompanied. There was a difference. Rescue made you smaller. Accompaniment let you stand. Claire slowly pushed herself away from the Bentley. She was still unsteady, but she did not reach for the door this time. Elijah noticed and pretended not to. Walk with me to the elevator? She asked. His expression stayed calm, but something in his eyes softened. Yes, ma'am. Claire, she said. The name sounded strange in the garage. Human. Unarmored. Elijah gave a small nod. Claire. They walked side by side, not touching, their reflections stretching across the damp concrete. The distance between them remained careful. Chosen. Safe. When they reached the elevator, Claire stopped before pressing the button. She looked at the closed metal doors, then at Elijah's jacket around her shoulders. I am not ready to go upstairs. Elijah looked at the panel, then at the booth down the lane where the vending machine light glowed blue. Then we do not go upstairs yet. Claire turned to him, and for the first time all night, the gratitude in her face was not hidden behind pride. It was quiet, almost painful. What do we do? Elijah picked up his empty coffee cup from where he had carried it without thinking, then smiled faintly at its uselessness. We get you a fresh bad coffee, he said. And after that, you decide on the next breath. Claire looked toward the booth. The smallest laugh left her, soft as rain on concrete. Then she walked with him toward the vending machine light, away from the Bentley, away from the phone, away from the version of herself everyone upstairs was waiting to use. The vending machine hummed at the edge of the garage like the last small business still open in a sleeping city. Its blue light washed over Claire's face as she stood in Elijah's jacket, studying the rows of candy bars, chips, and canned coffee as if they belonged to a country she had never visited. Elijah fed 2 crumpled dollar bills into the slot. The machine rejected one. He smoothed it against his sleeve, tried again, and waited with the patience of a man used to machines, systems, and people refusing him the first time. Claire watched his hands. Wide palms, short nails, a thin scar across one knuckle. Hands that had lifted mop buckets, fixed broken gates, packed school lunches, and stopped themselves from reaching for her when she stumbled. The dollar finally disappeared. Elijah pressed the button for black coffee. The can dropped with a hard metallic thud. Claire flinched. He pretended not to notice. "Sorry," he said, bending to retrieve it. "This machine has no manners. Neither does my board. Your board probably costs more to fix." She smiled before she could stop herself. He held the can out, then paused, remembering. Instead of placing it in her hand, he set it on top of the machine. Her choice again. Always her choice. Claire looked at the can for a long moment, then picked it up. It was warm, not hot. Cheap metal. Cheap coffee. No assistant had ordered it. No one had tested the temperature or poured it into porcelain. Somehow that made it easier to accept. She opened it with a soft snap. The smell rose bitter and plain. Elijah bought a second one for himself, then leaned against the wall a careful distance away. Between them, the vending machine buzzed. Behind them, the Bentley sat abandoned under the fluorescent lights, her phone still locked inside it like a life she was not ready to return to. Claire took a sip and made a face. "That is awful. I gave you fair warning. You undersold it." Elijah nodded. "Best bad coffee in downtown Chicago." She took another sip anyway. He noticed. She knew he noticed. Neither of them said anything. The quiet had become a language by then, built out of restraint and small permissions. Claire lowered the can and looked toward the elevator. "When I was little, my father used to bring me here on Saturdays," she said. "Not this garage. The old building, before the merger. He would let me sit in the lobby with a coloring book while he worked upstairs." Elijah listened without turning her memory into a performance. "There was a guard named Mr. Coleman. He kept butterscotch candies in his desk. My father hated candy. Said sugar made children soft." Her mouth curved faintly. "Mr. Coleman gave me one every Saturday anyway. Told me a little sweetness never ruined anybody worth saving." Elijah looked down at his coffee. "Sounds like a wise man." He was. Her eyes stayed on the elevator doors. "When the company moved, my father let him go. Said loyalty was not a business model." The words left her slowly, as if she had been carrying them for years, but had never found a room quiet enough to set them down. "I remember watching Mr. Coleman clean out his desk. He saw me crying and gave me the last candy from the drawer." She swallowed. "I never asked my father to stop it. I was 11. But I remember deciding that if I ever had power, I would never make people feel that disposable." Elijah did not answer. The vending machine light flickered once. Claire let out a breath that almost became a laugh, but failed. "And tonight Richard told the board I had become sentimental. Too attached to legacy employees. Too protective of departments that should be cut." Daniel agreed with him. "He said I was letting childhood ghosts run a public company." Her fingers tightened around the can. Maybe he was right. Elijah lifted his eyes. Was Mr. Coleman a ghost? Claire looked at him. What? Was he a ghost? Or was he a man with candy in his desk who lost his job? The question was quiet. No judgment in it. That made it harder to hide from. Claire blinked, and something in her face opened with pain so clean it looked almost peaceful. "He was a man," she said. "Then maybe remembering him is not weakness." She stared at Elijah as if he had moved a wall without touching it. All night, the people around her had spoken in strategies, optics, fiduciary duty, shareholder pressure. Elijah had taken the whole polished machine of her life and placed one man back. Inside it, Mr. Coleman, a desk drawer, butterscotch, a child learning what power could do when nobody kind stood close enough to question it. Claire turned away, but this time she did not hide quickly. A tear slipped down her cheek, slow and unguarded. She wiped it once with the sleeve of Elijah's jacket, then looked at the damp spot as if startled by her own humanity. "I am wearing your jacket and crying into it," she said. "Naomi spilled pancake syrup on it last week." Elijah's voice stayed mild. "It has survived worse." A laugh broke through her tears. Small, embarrassed, real. Then the laugh folded into silence, and the silence folded into something heavier. Claire bent forward slightly, one hand pressed over her mouth, not sobbing loudly, not collapsing for effect, just losing the strength to hold every piece of herself in its assigned place. Elijah set his coffee on the floor. He did not touch her. He did not crowd her. He simply turned his body slightly away, becoming a wall against the open garage instead of a witness to her unraveling. That was when Claire understood the difference between being seen and being exposed. Daniel had seen her weakness and calculated. Richard had seen her hesitation and advanced. Elijah saw her pain and made a shelter out of not using it. The realization hurt more than betrayal because it was gentler. It showed her what she had been living without. I do not know who I am if I do not go back up there and fight, she whispered. Elijah looked toward the elevator, then toward the rain. Maybe you are the same person either way. She shook her head. You do not understand. If I lose the company, I lose the last thing my father trusted me with. Did he trust you with the company? Elijah asked. Or did he leave it because he did not know how to leave you, love? Claire went still. The question did not strike hard. It opened softly. That made it worse. For years, she had treated the company like a language her father could still speak through. Every acquisition, every cut she refused, every employee she protected, every night she slept under office lights had been part of a conversation with a man who was no longer there to answer. If she lost Whitmore Meridian, she feared she would finally hear the silence. Elijah watched her process it and said nothing more. He had already said enough. Claire looked down at the coffee can in her hand. Her reflection bent across the curved metal, small and distorted. Not a chief executive officer. Not a daughter performing strength for the dead. Just a woman in a parking garage after midnight, wrapped in a work jacket, holding terrible coffee, breathing one breath at a time. Naomi is lucky, she said. Elijah's face tightened with the reflexive humility of a parent who knew luck had little to do with overdue bills and school lunches made before dawn. She has had hard days. But she has you outside the door. He did not answer. That silence was the first time Claire saw his own wound clearly. Not every quiet man was whole. Some had simply learned to keep their broken places from becoming burdens. She stepped closer by one pace. Not enough to erase the boundary. Enough to acknowledge it. Thank you, she said. He looked at her then. You do not have to thank me for bad coffee. Not for that. Her voice steadied. Not the old corporate steadiness. Something warmer. For not making me explain myself before deciding I mattered. Elijah held her gaze for a second, then lowered his eyes. Praise seemed harder for him to accept than suspicion. People should not have to prove pain before somebody treats them gentle. The sentence settled into the blue vending machine light. Claire closed her eyes around it. Somewhere above them, Richard was likely building the morning against her. Daniel was probably writing messages with the careful concern of a man protecting his future. The board would want signatures, statements, obedience. But down here, at the bottom of the building, something had shifted so quietly no one upstairs could have measured it. Claire was no longer trying to become unbreakable before sunrise. She was learning that a person could be cracked and still standing. She opened her eyes and handed Elijah his jacket sleeve, the one she had dampened with tears. I am sorry. He glanced at it and gave the smallest shrug. Laundry soap works hard in my house. She smiled. Then she reached into the pocket by accident and felt folded paper. Oh, she said, pulling her hand back. Sorry. A small piece of construction paper had slipped partly out. Elijah saw it and took it gently, but not before Claire noticed the purple crayon on the edge. It was a drawing. A stick figure man standing outside a small square door. A little girl peeking from inside. Above them, in uneven child letters, Naomi had written, Daddy waits good. Claire stared at it. Elijah folded it once, carefully, the way some men folded flags. She made that when she was 6, he said. His voice had gone rough at the edges. I keep it for hard shifts. Claire's throat tightened. There was the whole story, drawn in crayon. Not power. Not romance. Not rescue. A man outside a door. A child inside. The kind of love that did not demand entry to prove it existed. Claire looked toward the Bentley, then toward the elevator, then back at Elijah. Her face had changed. The pain was still there, but something had risen underneath it. Not the armor from the gala. Not the cold command Richard knew how to provoke. Something quieter. More dangerous because it was honest. I need my phone, she said. Elijah nodded. All right. But I am not calling Daniel. She handed him back his folded drawing with both hands, as carefully as if returning something sacred. And I am not going upstairs to ask permission to keep my conscience. Elijah studied her face, then gave a slow nod. Sounds like the next breath. Claire looked at the dark shape of her car across the garage. The Bentley no longer looked like a cage. It looked like evidence of a night she had survived. She started walking toward it, Elijah beside her, still not touching, still close enough for the hallway not to feel empty. At the car, she reached inside, picked up the phone, and watched the screen flood with missed calls. Her thumb hovered for a second. Then she opened a new message, not to Richard, not to Daniel, but to her general counsel. Her voice was quiet as she typed. Emergency board review. 6:30 in the morning. Full attendance. No proxies. Elijah stood a few feet away, rain lights silvering the floor behind him. Claire pressed send. The message disappeared into the dark. Upstairs, the war would begin soon. But this time, she would not walk into it as a woman trying to prove she could not be hurt. She would walk in as someone who had been hurt and still remembered the difference between power and mercy. Claire did not move after she pressed send. The phone stayed in her hand, its screen dimming slowly, while the garage returned to its low mechanical breathing. Pipes ticking, rain falling, the vending machine humming behind them like nothing important had happened. Elijah stood a few feet away, Naomi's folded drawing safe in his jacket pocket again. He looked toward the ramp, then at the time on the wall clock above the booth. 1:46 in the morning. You should go home, Claire said. This time, it was not a dismissal. It was care trying to speak a language it had not practiced in years. Elijah heard the difference. His eyes softened, but his answer came carefully. I will. Claire nodded, then looked at the elevator. The doors reflected her in broken silver. Silk blouse, work jacket, tired eyes. A woman carrying a company, a dead father, a betrayal, and a cup of vending machine coffee that had gone cold in her hand. She had never looked less like the woman on the ballroom screens. She had never felt more real. 6:30, she said. That gives me 4 hours to find out who is still loyal to the truth. Elijah picked up the empty cracker wrapper from the hood of her car and folded it into his palm. Truth has a way of making the room smaller. Is that good? Depends who needs somewhere to hide. A faint smile touched her mouth. It did not last, but it left warmth behind. Then Mason appeared near the elevator, hesitant, his radio lowered at his side. He looked at Claire first, then Elijah. Miss Whitmore, he said, voice quieter than before. I checked the camera log like you asked security to do earlier this week. There is something wrong with the footage from this level. Claire went still. Wrong how? Mason swallowed. A 15-minute gap. From 11:58 to 12:13. The backup drive shows an access override from it. Executive credential. The garage seemed to tighten around the words. Claire looked at Elijah. Not because she expected him to solve it. Because he had been there in the missing space. Before the chair. Before the coffee. Before she found the strength to open the door. Elijah understood the question before she asked it. His shift. His eyes. His memory. The invisible man in the garage had become the one person the missing footage could not erase. Mason looked ashamed now. I am sorry, he said, not loudly, not for everything, but for enough to matter. Elijah gave him a small nod. Some apologies were beginnings, not repairs. Claire turned toward the elevator again. This time, her shoulders did not fold inward. The jacket still hung on her, too large and too ordinary, but she did not take it off. Elijah, she said. He looked up. Yes, ma'am. She almost corrected him again, then let the formality stand. It belonged to him. His distance. His dignity. At 6:30, they are going to ask what happened down here. He held her gaze. Naomi was waiting at home. Rent was waiting Friday. Morning was waiting with school lunches and a solar system project, and a little girl who needed her father to return from the night hole. Claire knew it. That was why she did not ask the way Richard would have asked. She did not assume his courage was hers to spend. You do not have to stand in this, she said. Elijah looked at the dark Bentley, the elevator, the rain beyond the ramp. Then his hand moved once to the pocket where Naomi's drawing rested. A man outside a door. A child inside. Love measured by presence. No, he said softly. I do not. The elevator opened with a clean metallic sigh. Claire stepped inside first, then turned. Elijah remained outside for one breath. The blue garage light behind him, the city rained silver at his back. For a second, he looked like every ordinary man the world had trained itself not to notice. Then he stepped into the elevator beside her. Mason stayed behind, holding the doors until they closed. Claire and Elijah stood shoulder to shoulder, without touching as the numbers began to rise. Neither spoke. Some silences asked for rescue. Some asked for witness. And some, if a person is brave enough to stay inside them, become the first honest room two strangers ever share.